Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this for being here. We've got our Canterbury Regional Council Land Strategy workshop to enable council to workshop on the draft strategy, and we've got Jesse, Lee, and Marie. Marie and Lee. Yes, Lee. Sorry, I was thinking, where's Jesse? But he's on the screen. I got. I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Yeah, I do need glasses, maybe. We've got a few councillors who are away today, and there's a little bit of sickness around, so you'll see people moving around, and people come and join online as well. But we'll kick off this presentation, and we take it however you want it to be taken.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Right, so the purpose of the workshop is to provide you with a draft of the strategy that reflects the engagement to date. This is the third of the 3 river-based strategies that we've been working on, and after adopting the Braided River Revival Whakahaumanu Ngā Awa Pākihi 100-year strategy and the gravel management strategy at your July council meeting, we know that you are really keen to see a draft of this land strategy. So we have stood up a draft document. It has the same structure as the other 2. The content requires a lot more work, particularly further opportunities for staff and Papati Purunanga to input and comment on an actual draft document. We're hoping that the workshop provides an opportunity for you to give guidance on the content of the strategy, and through you, Chair, staff are happy to receive detailed comments and marked up documents by email, as we have in the past for things like the gravel management strategy, which allows time to sort of free up for discussion, but also for us to capture all of the details that councillors have put on a draft, and also will of course take notes throughout this. If we just move through the background slides. This is the context slide, which you've seen before, just positioning this in all of our Braided River Revival work. The process timeline. Oh, and just to reiterate, so after feedback today, we will take away your comments and revise the draft. There's a couple of options at the end of the paper about what we do next, whether we come back to the Strategy and Policy Committee with an updated draft, bearing in mind that the papers are due in a week, but we could make quite significant progress from where we are now in a week, or that next draft can go to the next council towards the end of the calendar year. So that may depend on your thoughts today. Right, so this is a regional representation of our land. As you can see, it's difficult to sort of capture at this level, and hence the breakdown of maps in the draft document. It does illustrate where the concentrations of land are and also its connection to rivers. As you can see, it's almost all on or in rivers, and you can see where the concentrations are, particularly in the Waimakariri, Kaikoura, and the Rakaia. So these are all things that we've workshopped with you before. The purpose of the strategy and the goal, which is for our land to deliver the long-term aspirations and strategic priorities. And we have, and as discussed in our December workshop, the outcomes here reflect the 3 outcomes from Braided River Revival, and also add a finance and revenue and carbon negative outcomes. In the gravel management strategy, we use those same 3 core outcomes as Braided River Revival, and added an extra one focused on gravel. I think the point is that our land hasn't historically been managed with revenue optimisation as an outcome, and we haven't until recently, and I know Giles is here and he's been doing work on this that you have it's been brought to you, actively pursued where our land can attract investment and sustainable commercial returns across the portfolio. And the point of this having a revenue outcome in here brings that work and the work that Giles's team has brought you to the strategy. The carbon negative outcome recognises significance of carbon emission reduction, not only through obvious examples like forestry, but also through nature-based solutions. There are examples where it appears that underlying legislation may restrict or affect the commercial use or investment in our land. And I know that you've had recent examples of that with flood protection purposes and proposed commercial developments. We haven't managed our forest estate to maximise its ETS potential. We haven't mapped all the ETS eligible land. We don't have an ETS trading policy or a policy and criteria on acquisition and disposal of land. And the purpose of this strategy is to articulate the what we're trying to achieve, so those integrated outcomes and objectives, and then the implementation is how we will get that. But through that development, we've recognised a whole lot of those things that are needed in the implementation to deliver these, and that's just a couple that I've mentioned. This is some of the feedback from you in December that we've used to review the objectives and the draft content. And this is some of the Papatipu Runanga feedback to date. We're in the process of engaging with Papatipu Runanga. I've met with Kaikoura Arowhenua and Whiti Ora on behalf of Ngai Tuahuriri. We've sat down and looked at Canterbury maps and looked at where the land is in their respective takiwā and talked about their interest in that land, current land use, potential land use, how this land is part of the wider catchment and landscape and how it can be viewed in that context. We've been very clear that this is a regional strategy development informed by the at-place values and interests, and that the strategy needs to provide for and facilitate those place-based actions, but it doesn't include them or go into detail about them, and it in the current and existing work programs are where those opportunities for action lie. Papatipu Runanga have reflected that our ownership of or administration of this land provides opportunities, and they're very keen to explore those within their takiwā. We have got numerous examples of where where that's already happening, and probably one that you are aware of is the Arowhenua partnership in the Takapo Regional Park with the wilding pine removal and the biodiversity work, Te Ipurake o Motuariki project. The other thing we have been doing, which we know that Runanga appreciate, is approaching and discussing this land strategy development as part of a bigger catchment or takiwā conversation. For example, with Whiti Ora, we've been talking about the Rakahuri in the context of our land there, the on-the-ground work that's happening, the regional infrastructure projects, the revival strategy, the scheme review, and other opportunities. We're trying to take a holistic approach to that catchment and situate our land as part of that work, and working with mana whenua across in that sort of a space. They are appreciative of that. Of course, there's still room for improvement. We are awaiting engagement with other runanga, and the runanga that we have met with are keen to see a draft once we've shaped it up a bit. These are the revised objectives from the list that we brought you in December. There are a few that have been picked up specifically, which I'll just mention from your feedback. The public land management is aligned to achieve collective action and landscape scale outcomes. That was something that was raised by a few councillors. Councillor Southworth, I think you were one of them. And when you see those maps in the draft, you do see the relationship between our land and other agency land, particularly DOC and LINZ. A balanced mixed forestry portfolio delivering returns, which ties, and I'll bring that up later in the implementation piece, but that ties really well in with our climate action plan. The research programs and also the strategic assessment of opportunities to acquire and dispose of land. It's just a couple of examples that were directly related to some of your feedback.
Sorry, I'm busy reading. This was at the same time. I'm Claire.
Sorry, just a question. Do you want to take questions now on this first slide? So just a question of clarity around highly productive land use 1 to 3. Has that been taken off the draft RPS modelling that we've done around that? Do you know? Because the packet, is my understanding of it, part of that modelling work was looking at larger blocks of land that fell into that 1 to 3 class.
So I'm not aware of whether we've done that mapping yet, but those, as an objective, we're saying if we have that land, then that's the purpose for which it would be used. I note your concern that a lot of our parcels are quite small and that may not be practical, and that some of the bigger ones probably don't make that class.
So yeah, if I can just add to that, because my understanding is that we did choose bigger parcels or staffed it in the RPS, draft RPS. But there is quite a bit of land that we do own that would certainly be highly productive primary production land. So I just think that we need to make sure that if we start using a classification like that there's some sensible lineup or alignment.
Councillor Southworth?
Yeah, further to that conversation, I'm just wondering about the proximity to urban environments as well. There's a lot more talk about food production for the local communities, and that type of agriculture may well suit smaller pieces of land and local community solutions for food production. So I think we need to consider that proximity aspect as well.
Just press your button.
Oh, sorry. In achieving those outcomes and objectives, where at the regional scale we can look at all of our land and assess its current values, its ecological values, its significance in our flood and river resilience network, particularly given climate change predictions, its ETS eligibility, the values mana whenua hold for it, and that other example of looking at the status of the productive land, that would come under that as well. We can understand some potential commercial values, for example, for solar, because it's a known and growing land use, but there will be others. We need to look at the legislation. What does it provide for, permit, restrict? What values are nationally or regionally significant, for example, in an ecological context? We can do all of this preparation, and some of that is underway. We will need to see what uses are compatible and what aren't. There will be land that can support multiple values and those integrated outcomes. In other cases, there may only be a single land use, but the integrated outcomes are derived from the portfolio across the region. There'll be, so going back to the example where it appears that the underlying legislation may restrict or affect commercial use or investment in our land. We've had examples of that with flood protection purposes and proposed commercial development. There will be areas of higher and lower risk and nuances within that, and that's the work required. So we are drafting implementation plans at the same time. I think I mentioned last time that the process of doing this work has brought up a really long to-do list, where we know a lot of the work that we need to do. Some of that can be done within our current business as planned, and some of it will need to come to the council and long-term plan processes to seek resources.
Councillor Davies, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm just looking through it now. I think it's really good to the maps and seeing the land and how it aligns with other public land. But my query is just around the objective, around saying public land management is aligned to achieve collective action and landscape scale outcomes. I'm just wondering how, like, the relationship of it being a regional land strategy and how we'd have to align with other agencies' land management. I'm just trying to get my head around this objective. If we could just help me understand that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Some of that stems from the experience we had doing that Braided River Action Group project in the Rakatata, where and if you look at that Rakatata map, you'll see the way that our land and Dockland and Lynn's land is all intertwined. We found that there are examples where, for instance, all three organisations have a license, a grazing license to the same landowner who will also have some private land in there, and that they all have different terms and conditions, and we're charging different amounts of rent, and we have different conditions about the environmental constraints or activities on that land. And so through that process, we did quite a bit of work with Linz and Doc to think about what the opportunities were to get better outcomes from our land, and to also be more efficient about that. We've got 3 different people processing licenses for the same person who can see all the difference across it, and there's no consistency. So at the really sort of low level, detailed level, we're talking about that kind of thing. At a higher level, we're probably talking about where are the conservation values, where are the places we can have multiple uses, how can we might be opportunities for us to manage other land for particularly flood and river resilience that's currently managed by Doc or Lynn. So we have examples of that as well. Sorry, it's getting quite detailed, but that's the sort of thinking. There may be some adjustment to the words, but I think the intent is to work more closely together to look at what our common objectives are.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in support of that, and I do support the intent of the objective. There might just be some kind of carve out, just in case, say, the objectives weren't aligned. So there was, but that still wouldn't get in the way of us implementing our strategy on our land in that event. So it's just, there'll be a wording, there'll be some solution. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just going back to the finance and revenue and the highly productive land 1 to 3. Just with regards to sort of the changing environment and climate change with water availability, how set in stone is the protected areas for primary production? Because we need some sort of adaptability there as well, considering scarcity of water sort of becoming more of an issue. And if that would be part of the strategy as well, sort of looking out for those sort of trends happening going forward.
Thank you for the question. You've got quite a good point. I think we'll give some consideration to taking out the 1 to 3 reference in terms of setting in stone what that is. Might give more agility. We'll give that some thought.
Councillor Southworth, and then we'll move on to the next.
Yeah, I was thinking about the sort of water resilience and water security side of things. Thinking about the presentation that we had from Scott Wilson, and that ties in with Braided River Revival and the gravel strategy and so on as well. But I think where it's sort of incorporated, but maybe it needs an explicit reference to it, is you've got the Braided River ecosystems are thriving and healthy, and you've also got blue-green networks enhancing climate resilience. So I think it's alluded to, but maybe that water security and resilience should be more explicit, because it is a bit of a shifting thinking. Like, we've been very focused on flood, but we've sort of gradually coming to going, actually there's a relationship between our sort of flood management and our resilience to droughts and water topping back up our aquifers and all that sort of thing. So it's just making sure maybe it's more explicit so we keep it front of mind.
we'll carry on with the rest of the presentation. I think you've only got a few slides, and then we'll get into the next questions.
Similar to what we brought you with the Braided River Revival strategy, we've just put in a few slides in here about to illustrate how the implementation planning process is working in the work, just to give you reassurance of how the current and future work is pulled into implementation, and then how that's reported on. So those are the objectives on the left hand side, and then the we wills, or the actions that to deliver those, on the right hand side. The timing's all out. And then I've just pulled out a couple that are on the next slide, just to show you, just to map across how we are preparing implementation plans, or already doing those. So it shows how they map back to the core services and the impact framework and our performance. The top one is through preparing a transition plan for non-productive areas, and that actually maps back to one of the actions in the climate action plan. And then the other one is reported through an ERP outcome measure. There's other examples. So the next steps, going back to sort of the opening comments, that there's ongoing engagement to be had with Papiti Purunanga and internal staff and key external stakeholders, and then there's the option to return either to this council in the Strategy and Policy Committee in September with a revised draft, or a revised draft to the new council late in this calendar year or early next year.
Okay, so any questions from councillors? I know that Councillor Edge has a few, so we'll start with you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much for the report. Yeah, I understand where we've come from in terms of previous meetings. I think that for me the most useful document to date has been the June 2022 document, where it kind of elaborates a little bit more on what you've got here. Same issues for me as I've conveyed before, about a lack of vision. I'm probably going to comment rather than ask questions. A lack of a vision document, which gives me the indication that we are truly thinking of Kirikitai from the mountains to the sea, and that we're looking at things in terms of corridors. But I realise that when the maps that you have provided, that there is very few sort of perhaps Kaikoura, Waimakariri and the Rakaia have a wee bit more continuous land asset, if you like, whereas South Canterbury's just a dots all over the place. One thing for me, and I think, look, one of the, just as you're doing this, probably the most useful document or useful page, apart from page 11, is page 14, where you've identified the focus for future actions. I think you probably need to play that up a wee bit more, because it's got some good things about what you're going to identify, whereas they're not identified here at the moment, clearly for me, in terms of, for example, develop a land acquisition disposal policy. And it's really useful seeing the associated land from the government agencies, but which is good. And the thought crossed my mind, well, if 3 agencies are looking at a river corridor and looking at land use, all those sorts of things, and is there an opportunity to look at that from an economic point of view and set up a CCO with all 3 agencies, or set up a completely new agency to actually look at the whole of that landscape from a corridor perspective, looking at public-private land, and I just think at the moment we've got a little way to go, and I just really can't see coming back this triennium, but shape it up a bit more. And for me, I need more information in terms of base data, and looking at some opportunities a little bit more. I mean, you've identified on that page about the goal of looking just at our land. And I just think in terms of a strategic approach for the regional council, we have to be looking beyond our land, and what are the opportunities for multi-use, using other people in partnership. I wondered what was meant by what have you said here? Sorry, Chair. On that page that talks about use. Can't find it now. The best use, and you kind of think, well, what is it? Or highest value, all that sort of stuff. Well, to me, we've got to understand what we've got first before you can actually go down that track. And I think if you look at climate adaptation as being part of that bigger picture corridor approach, because it always bothers me that we've got this forestry and it's right up to the edge of the current rivers, and we've got stock banks and forestry, and you think, well, why is it there? If you took an approach that is part of the strategy, you looked at the idea of overland flow paths and how you could manage that land a little bit more so that it's efficient for everybody. And maybe you're kind of looking at the private sector and saying, well, okay, if in a big storm event the water can go over there, so we're not we're keeping the urban areas, if you like, protected. But anyway, I just think there's some scope thinking outside the square for this a little bit more, but trying to get that bigger picture, get those connections going, and look at land use activity in that. And looking at it from an economic point of view, I don't think there's enough in the document about what is the economic value of thinking outside the square, not only in terms of our river stuff, but also the other land that we own, which we haven't really talked about here. What is our opportunity about the perpetual leases, for example? I mean, they've just been a bit of a disaster, really, in terms of limiting our ability to look at that commercial aspect. But I mean, the two documents together, it's good having the other one as well, and there's some good documents in terms of stuff at the back. But I think I'll put some comments, because I've got too many suggestions and comments in a critiquing kind of way. Hopefully that some of those might come through.
Thanks, Grant. We've got Councillor McCoy. Yes.
Thank you. So my computer's playing up, so I can't go back to the original slides. But I am also thinking, like Councillor Edge, that we need a very clear definition of, I think, was it highest value and best use? I think was the words. I think that we do need pretty good definition around what that actually is. In the draft, look, I think you've got a pretty good framework here to work from. And like Councillor Edge, I'm probably reasonably comfortable with what you've got there. I think that there needs to be quite a little bit of a look at pages 16 and 17. There's a huge amount of challenges for strategic management, particularly working across agencies, and you've got them listed there. I don't know whether they need the fullness that you've particularly got there. And the question I would pose back to you, and it may be a discussion for the next council, is, are we going to get better bang for buck if we actually do focus on our own land, and particularly focus on our own land where we've got the larger parcels and more contiguous stuff. Because I think the maps have certainly highlighted for me that as you certainly go further south to mid and South Canterbury, Linz and Dock have got a huge amount of land, and our controlling bits or owned bits are far less. So it seems to me that it make more sense to focus where we've got more land, Waimakariri and obviously Ashley. I just would like some clarity. We use that we've got 25,000 hectares, and then we've got, including riverbed in one place, but we don't mention that again. And I think there needs to be some definition there around what is riverbed and what is not riverbed, because I think that's quite important, because we can't do stuff in riverbed, and we still. Well, we're seeking that clarity in an RMA process form. There is still a bit of uncertainty around that. So, look, I think just for me, I think, as I say, 16, you just really need to look about what information do you need on that challenges page, and 17, aspirations and priorities. They will change over time, so I don't want anything set in stone that we can't change. And yeah, just thinking about where we're actually going to get that concept of highest value and best use. So, and from my thinking currently, it's around our own land.
Councillor Robinson.
Kind of the devil's advocate style of thinking. I was just sitting here thinking, is there any discussions, I guess, with potential overreach from central government into what we do with our land? You've got Linz and Dock land and our land run by the region and us, but I'm just wondering if there's any innuendo to date that could be overreaching into what we do strategically that has, I guess, more direction from central government that we... that's my concern, is that we may be asked to do certain things with our land that may not actually be something we have considered or want to do, and that are we prepared for that, I guess, going forward. Is there any way that's been discussed or alluded to at any point?
It's a very good question. I guess at a high level, adopting a strategy will probably help us in that space. The majority of our land is vested for flood protection purposes, so when central government make a decision about what functions may go where in the future, if that's what they do, I guess there will be a question of, given the land's primarily vested for that purpose, where does it go, or does it get aggregated up? Certainly at a staff level, we're not aware of any immediate discussions in that space, but I suspect it'll depend what they do with local government in the future.
Yeah, which is really good to actually hear that and be prepared, I guess, the strategy, and probably highlight areas that would fit our strategy and purpose going forward, in preferential bits first. I'm looking forward to seeing that, actually hearing that discussion, so thank you.
Councillor Sunkel.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It gives us a greater understanding of our land. I guess Councillor Edge alluded to, and you did briefly, on what might be available for further commercialisation. So I guess I'm interested at what point do you think you might be able to bring back to us those areas that we could further commercialise? We know the land that sits around the airport, some of those pieces. Just giving us an understanding, and I think from my recollection of our previous conversations, we talked about the land that was environmental and we needed to protect, and there was some of that intermediate land that was recreational, a bunch of things, and then we really wanted to understand what was commercial and could be further developed into whatever. When I say maximise, I don't mean absolute maximise, but the ability to maximise some greater return from it to subsidise rates or the like, even if it does sit within river schemes and a bunch of things. So I'm just interested to know when we might get to a point of understanding what those pieces are that we might be able to commercialise other than the conversation sort of sitting around forestry. Yeah, thanks.
We're turning around to look at Giles. I think that's part of when I said that we need to do a lot more work with internal staff on that. Part of that is really connecting with Giles's team, because I know that they've started doing some of that. Not our commercial land as in our urban, the buildings next door, but how we look for commercial opportunities on the land that we're talking about here. So I don't think we have a specific time frame, but I know that Giles does have staff working on that. So.
Yeah, apologies. So we're coming back to council next week with some proposals around solar, as we briefed council in last week, and we also are working on plans for the other industrial land around Cheney's and Johns Road. That includes the investigation of potentially using part of Johns Road to become a public transport depot. So that work is underway. We can certainly pull it together and bring it back to council as a package.
Luke, thanks for that. I sort of see this as a spatial planning, so just getting to a point where we can identify those pieces that are available for options. And I've got no preconceived idea. Yes, we have solar in the way and some of those other developments, but there must be, in my mind, other land that might be available over time for an expansion of. But once we've got that plan and sitting in place, then it provides opportunity.
There inevitably will be other portions of land that we need to work closely with other parts of the organisation. Our focus has been on those parcels of land that are already zoned for industrial use, council is aware of, and then also the ongoing conversations around that Waimakariri reserve land with the potential for renewable energy. But we're certainly aware that there will be other opportunities once we've landed what we want to do with those main parts of land.
Did any of the councillors who were online have any comments, questions, noting that you can email questions or comments into this strategy development as well? Chair Pauling.
Oh, sorry, Dan. I was just going to put my thumbs up and say, no, I'm all good. Thank you.
Is that the same as you, Councillor Ward?
Yes, definitely.
Excellent. All good. I've got Councillor Southworth and then Councillor Cromwell.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the data, the information in the tables, I personally would find it helpful to just get a sense of the scale of the regional parks in relation to all of our land holdings, because they're not the same thing. And then similarly, the forestry part, we've got like a breakdown of the forestry in the different regional parks, but I don't have a sense of how they then relate to the total scale of each of those. So I think it's just breaking them down into each of those river catchments would be really helpful, just to add a little bit more data. I think there's lots of really good stuff in the draft. The thing that where I do feel like the purpose and the goal are a bit unaspirational, like they're very perfunctory. And purpose, you want to feel a bit of passion towards a purpose. And I mean, I always wonder whether something along the lines of an intergenerational strategy that is responsive to climate change, or something where there's a really strong connection between our opportunity and the fact that that alludes to the fact there's going to need to be change as time goes forward. But that's sort of just a suggestion, but something that's got more of that aspect to it. And then the goal, I mean, I wonder whether that, like the shift, so it's really fundamental, this shift from sort of looking at the financial profit exclusively and shifting to, albeit that we're actually acknowledging that perhaps we actually haven't maximised profit at all. We've been quite sort of limiting in terms of the types of opportunities we've looked at. But that shift to a more holistic consideration of our land and the opportunities there, that's in that first paragraph, captured in the first paragraph under the goal, that feels to me like that's what should be the goal, is that maximising the value based on holistic range of outcomes. Or I'm not sure if I've got my terminologies quite right, but I think you probably get what I'm meaning. And I think something like that type of goal would be helpful. And then as time progresses, societal shifts and community consultation and the like will help us to formulate what's the balance of priorities and the different values that we can deliver on within these river catchments. Because it's the weighting. Where that's the bit that's the cruxy bit, and we don't know that yet. We might have some good ideas from the pieces of stakeholder engagement that we've done that contributed to our draft regional policy statement. Like, I think we can have a very good sense of taking the sort of balance and weighting that's been gone into our draft regional policy statement could help to inform this. And that's a sort of good starting point. And then as time goes on, those, say climate change effects are really ramping up, that might shift the weighting that we give to the different values that can be delivered through this. But that's my korero. Thank you.
Councillor Cromwell.
Kia ora tātou, kia ora kōrua. Just Marie, at the start in your introduction, you talked about runaka engagement and those kind of things. Well, firstly, probably this would have to go to the next council just because we probably wouldn't have time to have a Papatipa Runanga feedback in time. Because I'm just looking at the maps, and it's good having the maps, and you can actually see where everything is, and then related to DOC and also Lindsland as well. So that's just having that visually makes it so easy to kind of think about where things are. I mean, out of just looking at the map, probably only 7 of the 10 Papatipu and Canterbury are kind of affected, so therefore it is a more targeted with them than across the whole 10. So it's just probably how you and if you haven't managed to get all 7. I couldn't remember what you said at the start, Marie. Was it?
Not to date, but we've met with 3 and had conversations with 2 others, and we're adding more to that. So yes, I recognise that Te Pātako o Rakahotu don't have the same, we don't have land over there. So, but Taumutu and Wairewa are interested in the Kaitariti, and
Yeah, definitely for the for Kaitariti with Taumutu and Wairewa, but and probably similar to I was hoping to see probably a little bit more aspirational themes running through it. But one thing that that I just wanted to question on was you look at the leases and licenses. So if you do have aspirational and you want to do something with the land, and we do have leases and license over probably 9,000 hectares of the 25,000 hectares, and some of those in perpetual leases, I suppose in a sense, how aspirational can we be if what land we want to use is in perpetual leases? Just a question, yeah.
So with that particular land, we can't use. I mean, obviously, we can't use that it doesn't have the availability for the wider uses for some of the other land we're considering.
And if we did want to incorporate it, what would it? I suppose we'd have to. Yeah.
Sorry, that's a technical question I probably can't pull out. This council has purchased 2 perpetual leases back for reasons in the last triennium, or possibly the last 2, but yes, at market value rates. So.
I mean, it's I'm saying sometimes we could be aspirational, but some of those areas we won't be able to do anything because it'll cost, which will be shown down south. When we're doing work on the was it Hakateri and stuff? Yeah. So thank you for that, Marie. Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you for this. I had a couple of. I really want to second what Vicky was saying around the aspiration part of this, and that was one thing that I noticed. And I was also going to say around the purpose part. For me, the purpose is great. Could be a bit more aspirational, but I think we could take out the parts where it says the alignment of different council strategies and put that into a complete different section, because there is a whole lot of strategies that aren't even listed here that have been talked about that this aligns to, and so I think a separate page that has those alignments and why that's important would be really useful, so it can take it out of the purpose and just have that purpose and bring more of the aspiration into that purpose space. I think is just one piece of feedback that I was when I looked at it. But one thing, I'll write a whole lot of my feedback in, but I think when you look at the maps, and if we get this strategy right, and with what's coming in the regional government space, local government space, if we can get this right and we can show a vision around our region, we can go cap in hand with the government and say there needs to be some rationalisation of the land parcels of public land to do this right, because at the moment, we have a lot of conversations with different agencies about how to do things and how to, who does what, who has different responsibilities, and it is extremely difficult to sometimes get hold of the right people at the right time at pace. And I just want to sort of leave it on that note, because it's glaringly obvious that there needs to be some sort of rationalisation to do things well. And the government might be up for that conversation, because they need to have that conversation with us. So, and I'll write all the rest of my feedback, because But in terms of the question that you've got, do we do a progress update to the 10th of September Strategy and Policy Committee? I think you're hearing that maybe we're not ready for this to come back to sign off this term of council, but I think it's more important to get this right, and I think we've got the good bones of that. I think, Vicky, do you have a suggestion around what you think you want to do for your committee?
Well, only that it's talking about an update. It's not talking about signing anything off. And I think it would be actually really helpful to have a sort of, here's the, this has been in, I think, 2 terms. Certainly majority this term, but I think there was already discussion in the first term that I've been in. And so to have the input from a number of us who won't be here to comment next term, just as a bookmarking or an endpoint, I think that's quite helpful. Well, I think maybe staff would appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I think that's where I was thinking as well. An update at the Strategy and Policy Committee, and then it coming back to finish it off. Have you got something else there, Craig, you wanted to say?
Yeah, thanks, Dion. I'm just wondering, is there a like bones of a draft document, or
it's right
is
here.
it still just? Oh, sorry, I just haven't seen it.
Yeah, no.
True. Goodbye. So I think an update to S&P would be good.
Yeah.
In that case,
We're running a little bit out of time now. Grant is
just quickly. I just caution for me, the mapping exercise isn't complete in my view, as Claire was saying, in terms of, and there's a lot of work I think to do by the 10th, and I think it might be unfair of staff to actually come up with something much a little bit more refined than what we've got now. But I mean, if you can manage it, but as an update. But I just going back to my very first comment about, I got a lot out of the June 2022 report. It gives it highlights opportunities, talks about articulating an intergenerational vision for our current and future holdings.
Grant, if you can
keep
those thoughts alive, but write them down and share those with everybody.
Yeah, I'm just worried about coming back to
Vicky. Just lastly, sorry, do you want to respond to that?
No, I'd just like to ask 2 points of clarification. One, do you see reflected in here, by using the same outcomes as we have for Braided River Revival, Whakahomanunga Awa Pākehī, that is the overarching concept of how we work in and with and manage our rivers? Because that's a cascade to me too. That's the overarching, and then these things, which is why they have the same objectives, the same outcomes. If that's not clear in terms of being more sort of aspirational, then perhaps we need to make those links stronger. So that's my first question. and the other one is, if I just want to be clear whether what you want us to bring to S&P is that a updated document. We can update this document with your feedback as far as we can do in that time. We can do that, and I'm happy if that's your direction. Or we can bring you I guess a progress update, which would just be a verbal sort of conversation, what have we done since then, and thinking about your stuff, the comments that you've made. So either of those I'm comfortable with. I just want to be clear.
I'll ask the chair of that committee what.
I did hear at the very opening part that you could do quite a lot in a week. And you've had some feedback. And so, I've sort of got faith that they can incorporate something into a paper. I personally think that really clear linkage with the Brady River Revival. Most of our land is absolutely sitting firmly within Brady River catchment, so it makes perfect sense to me doing it that way. And obviously, having something updated from this meeting, and then coming into the 10th September gives councillors, and we're not all we're mostly online as well. We are, but hopefully we'll all be in the room and can, give some comment and in the meeting. Then I think that's potentially useful.
Okay, so I think there's a clear direction there, and thank you so much for bringing this to us. I think it's a good start, and as I said, there's good bones here for it to be. And I think councillors, when would you like feedback to be emailed in? Do you have a deadline?
As soon as you're able would be great.
Okay. So in the next day or two, councillors, make sure you get your feedback in, because the staff will need
it's
to...
It's not aspirational by far. It's
an evolution, and we're working on it. So.
It's going down the path of the Brady River Revival is not going to get us anywhere more than what we've got now. And I just think...
Put that feedback in.
Well, you're giving direction to staff. Are we giving the staff to say, just carry on with site-based kind of approach, or do we want to go aspirational and bigger? And what's the direction we're giving?
We're going to bring that back to the Strategy and Policy Committee for another hash at that, and we'll be able to bring that out a bit further. We're just out of time now. That's all. Thank you very much. We'll move